Today I'm standing on Burton Joyce roadside. This is the famous Stoke Bardolph outflow, what used to produce a lot of fish in the past. This is a fantastic mecca for roach. There's roach all the way down the road length, but today, because I'm doing some filming, I'm going to fish up in the ferry field up to my right here. The wind's off the back, and hopefully fishing pole and bloodworm and ground bait, I'll catch loads of fish. So I'm really looking forward to this today. I don't think I've ever fished bloodworm on this stretch before. It's always been maggots and casters for the roach. So today will be real interesting to see what I catch with pole and bloodworm. I fished here a couple of weeks ago and caught some good fish fishing down on the road stretch, and the roach are quite good quality. They're sort of 4 to 6 ounce size, and the ground bait that I'm going to mix today is going to reflect that the roach are of a good size. Now the ground bait that I've selected to start with is just a normal English brown crumb. Now the reason I'm using this is because it's a lot stickier. Census produce a brown crumb, but it's better for feeder fishing. It's not quite as sticky as what our English brown crumb is. Now the English brown crumb, because it's sticky, this is the base part of the mix for me. So I've got about 3 pints of brown crumb that I'm just going to pour into the bowl. The next ground bait is 3000 Gardons. It's a fine ground bait. Again, it's the Gardons fine. It's one of the mixes that is fantastic for roach fishing. It's quite sticky in itself and also quite a dark brown colour. So I'm going to use 2 bags of that because I'm going to introduce quite a lot of ground bait at start. The 2 bags that I'm going to put in the mix will help the ground bait stickiness again. Now you can see that's much darker than what the brown crumb is. So that's 2 bags of 3000 Gardon fine. Now the river today is pulling quite hard, and also when I've actually plumbed up the swim that I'm going to fish, I'm going to have to fish a little bit further out than what I wanted to do, and the flow is quite strong. I mean, I've rigged rigs up to 3 grams, so you can tell that the pace of the river is quite strong. Again, all this ground bait, I'm trying to make it as sticky as possible. Because I'm fishing with bloodworm and joker, I want the initial balls that I ball in to hit the bottom and remain almost intact. So to this mix I'm also going to add Census River. Now the Census River 3000 is very sticky, and if you were to use just this on its own, it's too sticky for the mix because it really holds together really strongly, and it would take a long time to break down. So I'm just going to put half a bag of river into the mix. If I were to put the full bag, I think, you know, the ground bait would take too long to break down. So I'm just putting half a bag of river. That you can put to one side and use at a later date on another outing. Again, another good additive to improve the stickiness of the ground bait is PV1 binder. Now Census produce a PV1 binder. Again, it's a very fine ground bait, but what that does, again, it helps the stickiness again. So that's basically the 3 ground baits that I'm going to use. So I've put them all into a bucket. Now the next thing to add, because the river here is very clear, I mean the River Trent, unless you have a lot of flood water, the water's very clear, and the ground bait as it is, the colour of the ground bait for me wouldn't quite be right. I want a nice dark mix. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some Census dye, some black dye. Now I'm going to add just a small amount to start with, just probably, I don't know, a couple of sort of tablespoons of black dye to the mix. And what this will do, once it's mixed in, it'll darken down the mix. And I want the mix to be quite dark in itself, so once it lays on the bottom, it's not too bright for the fish to come over. It'll sort of blend in with the bottom of the river. So now I'm going to mix all them ingredients together. Right, again, because I want the mix to be inert, when I say inert, I don't want any particles coming off the bottom and taking the fish down the swim. I'm going to add Aramix Gardens to this. Now, Aramix Gardens is actually a sweetener. It's quite a sweet additive, but I'm not particularly bothered about the sweetness of the additive. I'm not a big fan of liquids. But what this does, it actually kills the ground bait. When I say it kills the ground bait, what it does, it stops the activity of the ground bait, so you don't get the little particles coming off that'll take the fish away. So by adding Aramix, I'm just going to use a full bottle and just mix that into the mix. It smells ever so strong, but it's a very sweet type additive. Once I've mixed that through the mix, I can then start adding water. I'm just going to do the usual thing. I'm going to add the water very, very carefully to the mix. Another good tip, if you're handling ground baits, I mean, once the ground bait's wetted up, it'll get onto your hands. If you're handling ground bait when you're bloodworm fishing, it's good to put on a pair of gloves. And the reason for this, the salt's in the ground bait. Once you start fishing, if there's salt and ground bait on your hands and it starts getting into your bloodworm that you've got in water for the hook, you can actually kill the bloodworm, and the bloodworm's not as active and as good as what it should be. So I used to laugh at people putting a pair of gloves on, but I can now understand exactly why, because if you get ground bait on your hands and every time you dip in your bloodworm, it just makes a mess of your bloodworm. The bloodworm's not as active, not as good on the hook, and you catch less fish. So putting a pair of gloves on just to handle the mix is a good thing. So that's just starting to stick together. Just add a little bit more water. It's a darkish brown now, but as I add water, I'm sure that the mix will start to come together and also darken down a little. Now you can see the colour of that, it's starting to darken to what it was. It's a lot darker, the mix, than when I started, but I just want it a little bit darker than that. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of the Sensus black dye. Now this is a ground bait dye, and it does actually stay with the ground bait. If you use the wrong type of colouring, what it does, it leaves the ground bait, so it's not effective, but this stays with the ground bait very well, so your ground bait doesn't go light as it starts to break down on the bottom. It stays with the mix. You can see now that that's starting to darken off nicely. It's not big particles, this ground bait, but it's nice size for big roach. It's not over coarse, it's just a nice mix for roach. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to leave that to one side and I'm going to finish off rigging up the equipment and leave this for about 20 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about what I'm actually going to add to the ground bait to ball in at the start of the session. With bloodworm and joker, it's necessary that once you put the bloodworm and the joker into the mix, that you ball it in almost straight away. You don't want the bloodworm dying in the ground bait as such. So I'll go and finish rigging up and then we'll come back and have a look at what we're going to put into this mix. Right, I've finished the mix off. I've wetted it up so that the ground bait now easily sticks together. It's very, very tacky and just one squeeze will hold it together. Now what I'm going to do, I'm now going to add the bait I want to use into it. And all I'm going to add about a pint of hemp. I've measured out 5 litres into a census bucket. There's marks up the side, a litre every mark. And I've measured out 5 litres of ground bait. And this is the ground bait that I'm going to ball in at the start. This is the balling mix. So to that I'm going to add a pint of hemp. Now you can use your whisk just to separate that through the ground bait. I wouldn't do that with the joker, of course, but of course with the hemp you can just easily mix it into the ground bait with the whisk. Now the next thing I'm going to add, I've actually got some frozen joker. This is joker that's been froze in the fridge, so there's no activity, it's dead basically. But what I do to freeze it, I get any joker that I've got left over. I never throw joker away. What I do, I take it home, separate it up. I just use a dry ground bait. Normally I use the surface from Census, which is very fine and very dry. And what I do, I just add about probably 50 ml, maybe 100 ml with a pot into the joker, and I separate all the joker up and then put it into a bag like you would casters. This is absolutely the best way to keep joker for if you're wanting to freeze it, because it comes out of the bag, it's perfectly good. If you just leave it in the paper, it tends to dry out, rather like bread would. If you just put bread in without putting it in a bag, it dries out and it's horrible. Well, joker, if you bag it, you can take it out and then add it into your mix. So in the balling in mix, I'm just going to put about 150 ml of the dead joker. Right, that I'm going to mix in. Then I've also got some live joker, and again I'm going to put 150 ml of the live joker also into the mix. So that then I'm just going to give it a good, don't be frightened with joker, it's very, very strong. I mean, often when it's scraped out of rivers, they get balls of it and squeeze it to get the water out of it. It's reasonably strong. So you can then just work that through the actual ground bait. So you've got joker all the way through the mix. And really take your time and spread it through the mix as such. One thing I've not done, I've not put my gloves back on, which is very stupid, because this is the time really when you want your gloves on. So I've been a bit silly there really. But I'll have to wash my hands well before I start fishing with the bloodworm, because I don't want to kill it. So once I've got all that joker mixed through that mix, this is ready to ball up. So that's the balling in side of the ground bait. Now I'm also, once I've balled it in, I'm going to fish 14 metres today because that's where the bottom plums up best. Once I've balled that mix in, then I'm going to cup over top of it another mix. Now the balling in mix I'm going to squeeze really hard, which I'll show you in a moment, and the cupping mix I'm going to not over squeeze, because I want the cupping mix to open to feed the fish at the start, but the balling in mix I want to make really solid so it breaks down slowly. So I've got the joker into the 5 litres of ground bait as such. Right, the cupping mix then, I'm just going to add about 200 ml of joker into that. That's 150 ml. That's about 200 ml. So again, that I'm going to spread through the mix as such. Don't be frightened to work it in, because you want it all through the mix. You can see now that the joker's separated right through that mix as such. So then I can start to ball it up. Right, just taking another bucket. Make sure that your buckets are dry. You can't have any water in your buckets at all, because that'll spoil the ground bait. So now I can ball it up. And I'm really going to squeeze them balls quite tight together, because I want these balls to stay together. You can see the joker through the actual ground bait. But that I'm going to squeeze up really tight. Because the mix is very sticky, it will take a long time to break down. When I say a long time, probably, I don't know, maybe 35-40 minutes to break down. But of course, because I'm cupping some ground bait over the top that's not squeezed as much, that'll open a lot quicker. If you were to ball in and there were nothing available for the fish, they'd come to the initial balling in but probably just leave you straight away. So that's why you cup in with a mix that's not as tight as such. And there's other baits you could put to this. You could put casters, you could also put maybe dead pinkies or dead maggots, but because I'm fishing for roach today, I'm just sticking with hemp and also the joker. It's amazing, when you put joker to ground bait, it looks like there's very little in it, but when you actually analyse it, there's quite a lot of joker in that ball. 5 litres generally makes around about 10 good sized balls for balling in. I'm really pleased with that mix because you can feel how sticky it is. And that'll go straight to the bottom and then just break down nice and slowly. Yeah, that's perfect. So if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 balls, that's what I said. 5 litres is round about 10 of my big hand sized balls for balling. So that's the balling inside of the mix done. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to rinse my hands off and then I'll talk about the actual cupping mix and what I do with the cupping mix. So I've made the balling in balls and you can see I've really packed them together. Now the cupping balls then, what I'm going to cup in, all I'm going to do is just nicely squeeze them up. You can see that there's quite a bit of shape to them, so you know that once they hit the bottom they'll start to break down very quickly, and that's the balls that's going to feed the fish after the balling in. I want the balls that I'm actually balling to stay intact and these to break down, so that's all I'm doing is just nicely nipping these together, not squeezing them up real tight. Again, there's 2 litres of ground bait here, so you could actually squeeze 2 or 3 of these up as well. It's always difficult at the start of a session. If you've got too much bait in your peg, often what happens, you miss bites, you bump fish and have a real strange start. So this is why it's important to squeeze the other balls up, the throwing balls, and not to have too much bait open to the fish immediately. And that's where a lot of anglers go wrong. They're throwing a mix that opens straight away, and sometimes it's very detrimental to how you catch at the first start of the session. So that's the cupping in balls, just 2 litres, and that's made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 balls where I'm going to cup in over the top. So that's the ground bait done now. Let's go down on the bank and I'll ball in and see if we can catch some roach. Bloodworm you need to keep in water all the time. The bloodworm what I've scraped myself, I mean I've actually scraped this bloodworm, it never leaves the water. I bring it home and straight away it's in water, I run it through and it remains in water all the time. I bring it to the bank in these clip-on pots with the seal lids. So I just put an amount in, bring it to the bank and use it straight out of the water. I never try to keep it in paper, because what happens when you keep it in paper, it goes soft, and you want the bait to be strong on the hook. And any bloodworm that I keep, even when I'm at home in height of summer, I keep it in water and put it in the fridge, because the water needs to be cold all the time. If the water gets warm, the bloodworm suffers. So the bloodworm's in water in the fridge all the time, and you can keep it 3, 4, 5 weeks. So it's not, you know, not a problem if you keep running it through and looking after it and changing the water. So all the hook bait's in water. I just select a little pinch and then select the best bloodworms for the hook. And I'm just hooking 2 nice bloodworms on a size 18. And that's the hook bait that I'm catching everything on. You can put as many as 4 and 5 on a size sort of 16, and you know, so on red letter days when fish are feeding really well, you know, a big bunch can catch you bigger fish. But today the stamp of fish is not huge, and just a couple of bloodworms on an 18's been the best hook bait. I've been fishing for about sort of half an hour. Once I balled it in, I had some bites almost immediately. The fish reacted straight away to actual balls hitting water. Balling in can draw fish really quickly. Some days it's adverse, but it works opposite way. But when it does work and fish come to it, it's absolutely brilliant. And today it's worked really well. The balls that I cupped in will still probably be in ball shape, the ones I actually threw. And they'll be breaking down really slowly, but the balls that I cupped in will have opened almost immediately. So I know that I've got some bait still open to fish. Now I'll probably get away with fishing for another 20-25 minutes before I have to feed again, and then what I'll do, I'll just cup in some balls over the top. I'm fishing it very simple. I've got an AS7 float. I'm fishing with a gram at the minute. I've just dropped down from a gram 2.5 to a gram, and I'm basically putting my rig in about 2.5 meters above where I've balled in, and just setting the float up and then running directly over the bait. And it might surprise you that I'm actually fishing pace at current. I'm not slowing the float down hardly at all. All I'm trying to do is keep the line straight behind the float and fish at pace of the current. I think, you know, years of fishing on the river, when we used to catch on stick floats, you were always fishing at the pace of the flow. And you know, people who tried to slow float down just didn't really catch. And it's same with bloodworm. You're running the float through at the pace of the current. And that's what the fish are used to, so that's, you know, that's how they accept bait. It's very rare that I actually slow the bait down. All I'm fishing is just 2 bloodworms on a size 18 Drennan fine match hook to an 08 fluorocarbon hook length. Not fishing too heavy. I mean, you know, the water's very clear, and an 08 is just about right to catch any size of fish. I mean, if I hooked, you know, a roach 1.5 pounds, I'd be quite confident at getting it in on that type of equipment. I mean, an 08 hook length with a nice soft 5 elastic will land most fish that I'm going to hook. But each time I'm just lowering rig down 2.5 meters above where I've balled in, just straighten it line up, drop the pole down so the pole tip's just above the surface of the river, and then just running over the bait. Very simple. Some bites are lift bites, you just see it float lift a little bit, but often they just bury it. They've not seen bloodworm very often, I wouldn't have thought, on this river. And some bites are, you know, some's real good, but some of them you think, you know, float's almost travelling, and just you can sense almost there's a fish took it. That's a nice fish. A lovely roach. If you were fishing rod and line, you could probably swing some of these fish, you know, be a little bit more aggressive, but of course when you're fishing with elastic it's difficult to to sort of a swinger fish that size. Amount of food that must be in this river, that you can see how thick the fish is. The fish are really fit and the weigh really heavy. But absolutely brilliant fishing. Rigs, again, very simple. I've just got a block of number 8 shots and then 3 number 10s below. The main line I'm using is just 0.117 supplex, which again I don't like to fish with too heavy a main line. The main line behind the float, if you get some wind, it can easily affect the rig. So the main line again is quite fine. 0.12, 0.117 is about the right diameter for fishing on the river. You wouldn't want to be fishing any heavier because, you know, any amount of wind on the line will just affect the way the rig works. And it, you know, even though it's quite pacey today, a gram rig is catching fish quite well. I've actually set up 3 different rigs today. I've set up a 3 gram, a 2 gram, a gram 2.5 and also a gram. All in AS7 floats, which have got a nice roundish body. Absolutely perfect for river. They've got a nice 1mm fibre bristle, so you can see the bristles quite easily, but it's not over thick, it's just a 1mm bristle. Lovely for fishing bloodworm. A wire bottom so that the float just presents itself nice in the water as well. You can just hang slightly onto it. Not holding it back, but just tilting the bristles just slightly so that you're right on the pace of the current. But setting up 3 rigs, there's just, you know, some days fish will accept a bigger rig, and when they will, you know, you're going to clatter them. And the 3 gram ring, I've actually got a size 16 hook on it, and you know, if I'd have got catching on that, you can catch very quickly. But I've tried it a couple of times, I've had a couple of fish on it, but a lighter float, a gram 2.5 or a gram, seems better. And that's beauty of just setting up, you know, 2 or 3 different rigs. You've just you've got the option to try different things. I mean, 4 rigs today, as you know, I've tried every one of them, and it seems like a gram 2.5 or a gram is the best size float. I think if there were a little bit more colour and pace on, you know, I think the 2 or 3 gram would be the best. Elastics as well, I've kept again quite simple. I've got a number 5 elastic, but instead of having it the full length of the top kit, I mean, I've got a double top kit, 2 sections. Instead of having it the full length, what I've done, I've put a piece of Dacron at the bottom of the elastic, so I've only got about probably 1 metre 200, 1 metre 300 of elastic. It's a little bit shorter than what the top kit is, and this just gives you a chance to punch the hook home when you're fishing on a river, and also be a little bit more aggressive when you're shipping back. Ooh, that were a bite then. On the 3 gram rig, because you've got 3 grams on, you've got to strike through the float. So on that rig I've put a 6 elastic and a 16 hook. I wouldn't want to fish, you know, a lighter elastic as a you know, a number 5 with a 3 gram float, because you've got to get the float out of the water when you strike. So that's why I've got a 6 elastic. This is a bigger fish. I've had one roach that was probably about 12 ounce. This could be a perch actually. Yeah, it's a perch. We used to catch very few perch on river at one time, but of course I think everywhere where clear water's involved, then you seem to get more perch in all of the rivers. A really bony mouse. When you're fishing with quite fine hooks, you've got to be ever so careful when you're taking them off. When you bend your hook. You can see the rig. I mean, I've just got an Olivet. It's a 1 gram Olivet on a 125 float and 1, 2, 3, 4 number 10 droppers. Again, the block of shot above is to trim the float off. I always put the trimmers out of the way, about a metre up the actual rig. Just fishing 2 nice sized bloodworms on the hook. I've not used a lot of bait today. I've probably fed about 400 grams of joker, that's all, at the start. So you know, it's not a lot of bait. A pack of joker, you'd catch a lot of fish on the river. And it's not like it used to be, where, you know, people used to complain about the price of joker. I mean, now you buy a kilo of worms has cost more than 1 pack of joker. So the price of the bait is not so expensive. Oh, that were right on top of bait then. So you can have a lovely day's fishing for not a lot of cost, really. A bit smaller roach. That's about the smallest one I've had today, I think. I've fished for about an hour and a half now, and I need to top up, but I'm not going to top up just with 1 ball. I'm going to top up with 4 balls that's laden with joker. It's a big river, you're fishing a big river, and there's no point in topping up with tiny little balls. I think, you know, a full pot sized ball of the same mix, exactly the same. I'm wanting to feed ground bait, so I'm just going to plop in right on top of where I balled in another 4 balls. Now, because I'm using ground bait, you've got to put your joker into the mix. You can't add your joker at the start. So you have your joker in your paper, add your joker, what you're wanting to put in, into the balls, make the balls up and cup them in. If you were to try to put the joker in at the start, it'd just go to mush. The salt in the ground bait to kill it. I've also put some hemp as well in the balls. I want some hemp just to make a base on the floor as well. And I've caught quite well. It's not been absolutely fantastic, but the river is very clear today. But it's still been fantastic fishing. Well, that's been a cracking day's bloodworm fishing on the River Trent. Fantastic quality fish. A stoner roach is a nice day's fishing in my book anytime.